In the late 1950s, the Great Lakes shipping industry was experiencing a boom. The demand for steel was insatiable, the economy was thriving, and companies were locked in a relentless race to construct bigger, faster, and more efficient vessels to dominate the lucrative iron ore trade. Amidst this fervor, the Edmund Fitzgerald emerged as more than just another freighter. She was a symbol, a testament to ambition and engineering prowess. When she slid into the water in 1958 at 729 feet in length, the Fitzgerald was the longest ship ever to grace the inland seas. For many, she was nothing short of a floating marvel. Owned by the Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company and leased to the Columbia Transportation Division of Oglebay Norton, the Fitzgerald swiftly ascended to become the undisputed jewel of the Great Lakes. Her very name commanded respect. Edmund Fitzgerald, the company's president, took immense personal pride in the vessel, making a point of attending her christening and visiting her frequently. It wasn't uncommon to hear company executives openly boasting about her record-breaking performance to clients and in newspaper interviews. The Fitzgerald could carry over 26,000 tons of taconite pellets, more than any other ship on the lakes, and she did so with a refined grace that endeared her to both captains and crew. In those early years, she routinely shattered seasonal cargo records, often finishing the shipping season as the top hauler on the lakes. But the Fitzgerald was more than just a workhorse. She possessed a personality, a certain flair. Under her, First Captain Peter Pulser, the Fitzgerald gained renown not only for her speed and reliability, but also for her touch of showmanship. Captain Pulser would often play music over the ship's PA system, boosting crew morale and entertaining passing boats. While navigating through the locks, he would regale onlookers with trivia and fun facts over a bullhorn, transforming the ship into a spectacle as well as a freighter. Locals along her route learned to recognize her distinctive silhouette on the horizon, and children would eagerly rush to the shore to watch her glide by. For the men who sailed her, the Fitzgerald was more than just a workplace. It was a source of immense pride. The stewards boasted of serving the finest food in the entire fleet. Even the most ordinary deckhands would wax lyrical about the ship's remarkably steady motion in heavy seas. The officers loved her for her responsiveness and maneuverability. She was, in essence, built to work hard for a long time. Many believed that she would still be hauling ore well into the 21st century. That pride, however, fostered a sense of invulnerability, a silent agreement that the Fitzgerald was too strong, too resilient to acknowledge the possibility of genuine danger. She had weathered tremendous storms before, seemingly impervious to the forces of nature. Captains and crews became increasingly convinced that no matter the height of the wave or the strength of the wind, the Fitzgerald could handle it without sustaining any damage. This confidence was reinforced by her spotless safety record during the first decade of her service. Each successful crossing only added to the growing mystique of invincibility, further solidifying her reputation as a vessel above all others. That perception extended beyond the men on board, influencing the shipping companies, the insurance firms, and the public alike. She became a powerful marketing tool, a living embodiment of the strength and stability of Great Lakes commerce. And when a ship is perceived as unsinkable, the inclination is to push her harder. Schedules become tighter, turnaround times in port are shortened, and minor repairs are postponed because there is always another load to deliver. The Fitzgerald became a symbol of efficiency, but efficiency often comes at a price. In retrospect, that collective pride cultivated a dangerous blind spot. The pride of the American side reputation made it increasingly difficult for anyone to imagine that she could be in genuine trouble. Warnings were easily dismissed, and minor problems were downplayed because the Fitzgerald had always charged through, time and again. The mythology surrounding the ship's invincibility began to overshadow the reality of her condition, while the accolades and admiration continued to pour in. Subtle cracks, both literal and figurative, were beginning to appear. They were often overlooked, lurking beneath the fresh coat of paint and the polished veneer. In the unforgiving waters of the Great Lakes, even minor problems can prove fatal. No one could have foreseen that the very qualities that had made her a legend would also make her vulnerable. A voyage into the crosshairs. November 9th, 1975, began without drama. The Edmund Fitzgerald sat moored in Superior, Wisconsin, loaded with over 26,000 tons of taconite pellets destined for Zug Island near Detroit. The forecast was favorable, predicting only moderate weather. To seasoned sailors, it looked like a routine late-season run. Cold, yes, but manageable. Captain Ernest M. McSorley, a veteran with more than 4 decades at sea, had made similar trips dozens of times. At 2:15 p.m., the Fitzgerald eased away from the dock and set her bow toward open water. At that moment, the danger didn't lie in what the crew knew, but in what they didn't. 5 hours into the voyage, the National Weather Service updated its forecast. A low-pressure system was deepening and shifting, no longer expected to pass south of Lake Superior. Instead, it would sweep across the entire lake, bringing gale-force winds and massive waves. The change came fast, too fast for some vessels to alter their plans entirely. He made a decision to turn his experience and confidence regarding Fitzgerald's strength towards the Canadian shore. McSorley did not turn back or seek immediate shelter. Rather, he altered the course, directing toward the Canadian shoreline. In principle, the idea was sound: hug the shore for some degree of protection from wind and waves. But this maneuver also put the Fitzgerald on a longer course through waters that would still become dangerous if the storm intensified faster than expected. Throughout the night, the weather turned worse. By November 10's early hours, winds screamed across the lake at over 50 knots, and waves higher than 10 feet slapped the Fitzgerald's steel hull. Other vessels reported taking hammer spray, which afterwards froze instantly to decks and rails, adding perilous weight to their structure. The Fitzgerald pressed on, her massive bow rising and falling with each swell, sending shudders through her frame. About 2:45 p.m. came yet another complication: snow. Visibility dropped to near zero. The crew's lifeline was radar, and they slowed, to avoid careening ahead blindly into hazards. The Fitzgerald was no longer racing across the lake. She was crawling. A first radio call went out to the SS Arthur M. Anderson, another freighter about 10 miles behind. McSorley was calm but direct. "I have a fence rail down, 2 vents lost or damaged, and a list." A list, the ship leaning to one side, meant something down below had shifted or water had entered where it didn't belong. Losing vents was a terrible sign. It meant that by now, before the flooding of her cargo holds, the storm had already rendered equipment stateside with no force necessary. McSorley had asked Anderson to stay close in case things got worse. The day grew long, with each hour brimming with unstrapped, white-knuckled madness. It was during the hour of 7:10 p.m. when the first mate to the Anderson radioed in again, saying that the craft could offer navigation advice, and inquired about Fitzgerald's handling of the weather. 1. McSorley's quote would go down in history: "We are holding our own." That sound would be solid, even comforting, but it would conceal urgent matters. That was the last thing anyone heard from the Fitzgerald. Minutes later, the radar from the Anderson lost her altogether. In the intensifying storm, there was also no visual contact. The call-outs went unanswered. The Fitzgerald disappeared. To the men aboard the Anderson, it was a disquieting realization. They had followed what they thought was an unbreakable ship, only to see it disappear within minutes without so much as a signal of distress. As the snow closed in, so did the clock, and the captain made a gamble that would prove fatal. The fatal gamble captain, Ernest M. McSorley, was not a reckless man. By the fall of 1975, he was in the twilight of his career, a seasoned mariner with more than 40 years of navigating the Great Lakes. He had a reputation for competence, a calm voice on the radio, and a steady hand at the helm. But like many captains of his generation, he was also known for pushing hard to complete a run, even in punishing weather. On the lakes, reputation wasn't just about skill, it was about reliability, delivering cargo on schedule no matter what the sky threw at you. That mindset had served him well before, but the Fitzgerald's last voyage was different. The storm on November 10th wasn't just a blow. It was a brute force test of every weakness in the ship's structure and every judgment call made that day. By mid-afternoon, McSorley knew his vessel was compromised. The list to one side meant either cargo had shifted or water was finding its way below deck. The damaged vents suggested that openings into the cargo holds were now exposed. On a good day, those issues could be managed. On a night like this, they could turn deadly. Nevertheless, McSorley intended to press on. The Fitzgerald was only about 17 miles from safety, but that was when the squalls were concentrated. If they could reach the bay, it would give them time to assess and perhaps repair in safety. Under the conditions witnessed that night, though, 17 miles was as good as 170. The opposing choice was either to slow down and risk being caught in the heaviest part of the storm with very little control over her, or to keep up the speed and reach shelter before the weather got a whole lot worse. McSorley chose to keep up the speed. The Fitzgerald went ahead with all she had, but each wave that came against the hull had its counteraction from the bow being slammed in 100 gut-wrenching slams. This is perhaps the most complicated condition, in which the fierce battleground between the two was cast the weather itself, and McSorley's reasons for going or not going were bound and influenced by outside cruxes of many kinds. The shipping season was nearing its end. Delays during this time could mean lost days of operation. A master mariner perhaps had pride at stake. Turning back or hunkering down might be the safe option, but hardly reputation-saving. It just simply isn't keeping one's reputation intact within this community of today. There was now, as in the old days, an unspoken code among men on the lakes. You brought your ship and crew home on time, but that which McSorley could have remained unsure about was just how badly compromised his vessel might have been before the storm even hit. If water had begun to enter the hold through one or more damaged hatches or vents, every mile traveled forward compounded the flooding. Fitzgerald's ability to ride a wave became less with each ton of water taken on. Out in the cold, churning waters of Lake Superior, the margin of error disappeared. It was not simply an update when McSorley radioed Anderson with, "We're holding our own." Such an utterance defined their plight, but masked the urgency of the situation. Be it to steady his crew, reassure the Anderson, or stave off hopelessness, the effect was the same. Those listening did not realize just how close the Fitzgerald might have been to the breaking point. And then, in those last minutes following the call, something cataclysmic happened. Perhaps a rogue wave, structural failure, or a sudden rushing of already overstressed holds. Now the ship that had held its own is gone, taking all 29 men aboard with it. Unraveling the truth, exposing the cover-up, design flaws, and the legacy of silence. The Edmund Fitzgerald story is more than just a tale of a ship lost in a storm. It's a story of a potential cover-up, a story of design flaws swept under the rug, and a story of a legacy steeped in silence. For years, the official narrative painted a simple picture, a rogue storm overwhelming a sturdy vessel. But what if that narrative was carefully constructed to protect reputations, avoid liabilities, and maintain the status quo? Let's start with the design flaws. The Fitzgerald, for all her grandeur, had a fatal weakness: her hatch cover system. These massive steel lids, designed to seal the cargo holds, were notoriously prone to leaks, especially in heavy seas. Think about it. Constant pounding from massive waves, relentless flexing of the hull, and clamps that struggled to maintain a tight seal. It was a recipe for disaster. Reports from other ships of her class hinted at the problem, documenting issues with hatch cover integrity and water intrusion. The Coast Guard itself had even inquired about these hatch designs on Great Lakes freighters in the years leading up to the Fitzgerald's demise, recommending modifications to strengthen the covers and improve sealing. Some vessels took action, but the Fitzgerald, she sailed on, carrying a documented vulnerability into the heart of a November gale. Now consider the official report. While it acknowledged the severity of the storm, it conveniently downplayed the mechanical failures, the maintenance history, and those glaring design flaws. The focus was solely on the weather, portraying the Fitzgerald's loss as an unavoidable act of nature. But why did the Fitzgerald vanish without a distress call when other ships in the same area, facing the same storm, managed to survive? The testimony of the crew of the Arthur M. Anderson, the ship following the Fitzgerald, paints a troubling picture. They reported the Fitzgerald was already listing, indicating water was entering the hull, and had lost venting capability hours before her disappearance. Yet, this critical information was brushed aside, attributed to incidental damage from the storm. The implication is clear. Acknowledge significant flooding before the final moments, and the blame shifts from uncontrollable nature to potentially preventable causes. Divers who later explored the wreck found the ship's two main sections, lying on the lake bed with cargo still inside. This suggested a sudden sinking rather than a catastrophic breakup on the surface, as the official narrative claimed. Could it be that the Fitzgerald succumbed to a gradual flooding, her hatch covers failing one by one until she simply lost buoyancy and plunged to the depths? The evidence, though circumstantial, points towards a potential cover-up. The shipping industry, a vital cog in the steel production machine, had a vested interest in minimizing blame. A report highlighting maintenance failures or design flaws could have triggered costly retrofits, legal battles, and a public relations nightmare. Blaming the storm, on the other hand, provided closure for grieving families while protecting the industry's reputation and bottom line. Politics and economics, as always, played a crucial role. The Great Lakes shipping industry was a significant economic engine. Any acknowledgement of design flaws would have led to costly retrofits for vessels of its kind, and led to legal battles. And what about the missing and bent hatch clamps discovered during later expeditions? Were they damaged by the impact on the lake bed, as the Coast Guard suggested? Or were they signs of hatch cover failure, evidence of water intrusion that contributed to the sinking? The questions linger, unanswered. In the end, the official story became a carefully constructed narrative, one that shielded the shipping industry and the Fitzgerald's owners from scrutiny. It was a tale of a violent storm, a valiant crew, and an unfortunate accident. But was it the whole truth? Or was it a convenient simplification, designed to obscure a more complex and troubling reality? So, why the silence? Why the reluctance to revisit the Fitzgerald's sinking and acknowledge the potential for human error and corporate negligence? The answer, perhaps, lies in the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the pursuit of profit and the preservation of reputation outweigh the pursuit of justice and the acknowledgement of past mistakes. The Edmund Fitzgerald sinking serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most advanced technology and the most experienced sailors are vulnerable to the forces of nature and the consequences of human fallibility. But it's also a reminder that the pursuit of truth, however uncomfortable, is essential to learning from the past and preventing future tragedies. The lie that sank the Fitz is the one we keep telling ourselves, that she was simply a victim of the storm. Until we acknowledge the deeper truths, the legacy of the Edmund, Fitzgerald will remain forever shrouded in silence.